Hello and welcome back to M&K Unscripted. Today, why are you laughing at me?
I don't know. You just went right into it, and that was
Today we
fine.
are doing fear and fries.
We just ate fries from McDonald's.
Mm,
They were kind of a sleigh.
they were, except for we had to wait so long.
Yeah, that was kind of weird.
They told us to pull off to the side, and I was like, okay. So they're just fries. It's not that deep, but it's fine.
All we got was a small fry, and yeah, we waited a really long time for that.
That was my nickname in college. I'm kidding.
I said that before. That was my line.
What is your favorite type of fry, Megan?
Like from a restaurant or just
No,
in
just
general?
in general.
I'd say either Dairy Queen or Culver's fries. Because I like the crinkle cut. Crinkle cut's my favorite. And I like fries that are really soft and like McDonald's fries are not like big enough. Like I like them thicker.
Okay.
What about you?
I love a steak fry.
Ooh.
Oh, I also love a good waffle fry. Like those slap. Oh my gosh, I could really go for a waffle fry right now.
That sounds good.
Or I do like McDonald's fries, but like they wouldn't be my favorite. Like I like a thick fry.
Bro, why did
as
we
well.
go to McDonald's then to get fries?
Because it was on the way.
Yeah, I guess.
It's fine. We can't always be
Have you been to Red
close.
Robin?
Yum.
Because don't they have steak fries?
I think I have one time, and it was a really bad experience, so I haven't gone back.
Oh, we should go back.
Okay.
Okay,
Maybe I'll change my perception of red ramen.
maybe. I've only been there once, but
I think I just said red ramen. So, anyways,
yeah. Okay. Well,
let's get
today
into it.
we are talking about fear in all terms of the word. We kind of didn't talk about what we meant by fear before this. So
Let's talk about it.
I guess we'll find out what we both mean by fear when we say fear. What do you mean by fear, Kelly?
I literally, like 2 seconds before this podcast started, just had like an epiphany. And I see fear, at least in my life, as absence of control.
Ooh.
Like in the sense of a lot of the times when I'm fearful of something, like if I'm anxious about what's going to happen and I don't know what's going to happen, it's because I don't have control over a situation. And because I'm trying to be the one in control rather than like having God be in control. And so I think that a lot of the times, like, I don't know, like if you think of things that you're fearful of, like it could be a dumb example, but spiders. Like you don't have control over where that spider's gonna go. You're scared of that. Like that's scary. Or like something deeper, like fear of commitment to like a relationship or something. Like that's you don't necessarily have control. Like you have control over some things, but not over like everything that's going to happen. And so I feel like a lot of the times when I'm fearful of something, it's because I don't have complete control over that. And you're never gonna have complete control. So that's how I see fear.
Ooh. I like that definition. I feel like when I thought of fear, I thought of it from the perspective of like worrying and overthinking. Like to me, fear and worrying are like, I don't know, that's like the vein I was going on when I was thinking of fear. Which I guess is also like lack of control, but it's also just like lack of knowledge. Like usually you're worrying about the future because you're not sure what's going to happen, and so it's like unknown. Because usually I'm not afraid of the present because the present, like I'm like everything's going okay, like life is chugging along. But if I'm like thinking about like, oh, this might happen in the future, and what if this happens in the future, and like then that makes me fearful and worried, I guess.
Yeah. I feel like the unknown is kind of how you could summarize that.
Yeah.
Of like not knowing.
Into the unknown. Thank you.
Did you say thank you to yourself singing? What?
Yeah,
Okay.
I did.
So, anyways, that is fun. I have a question for you.
Okay.
I was kind of, when I was doing my research,
Research on fear?
Yeah. Well, I wasn't actually researching it, but I was just like brainstorming.
Mm.
And one of the questions that I kind of stumbled across was, do you think fear is a necessary emotion?
Ooh. Did you think of an answer while you were thinking?
It's not a yes or no answer, but it's like an answer.
Okay. Do you want to go first?
Sure.
Then I have time to think about it.
I think in some ways it's necessary if like you're in a position of potential danger, like having a little bit of awareness, like if I'm just thinking like if you're going to get kidnapped or murdered or something and like you need to have some sort of fear to like keep you away from situations that could be bad for you.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, like I don't know exactly what the Bible says about it, but like that's kind of where my brain was going is like if you truly trust God, like should you have fear? And my initial response is no, because then you would know that you're not in complete control. You would know that there's going to be unknown and still continue to like live your life anyways and not be fearful because you trust so much in God. And I also saw this quote that was like, fear is what if and faith is even if. And it's like,
Ooh.
fear is like, what if this happens? What will I do if it happens and I'm not prepared and all these things? And like, I definitely experience that a lot because I have anxiety. And so that's kind of where my brain goes. But having faith in God is knowing that even if the thing happens that you're fearful of, you know that God has a plan that's greater than you can ever imagine. And it reminds me of the song that I really love by Mercy Me that's called Even If. And it basically is talking about like I know that God can save me from this fire or can save me from this fear, but I'm still going to trust anyways. And so like I think in some ways maybe I wouldn't use fear as the emotion that you should have when you're like in a position that you might not be safe. Like maybe it would be more of just awareness or I don't know. I don't know. Maybe awareness of your surroundings rather than being fearful of them because like I don't know what I'm trying to say. I feel like fear can be a really negative emotion and like I don't think that that is an emotion that like that is something I'm trying to work on of like not being fearful of things that like aren't outside of my control.
Yeah, I feel like you've probably heard of the phrase like a healthy dose of fear.
Mhm.
And I feel like in some situations it's probably like I'm thinking of just like if you are like screwing around in your life or like when you think of like kids, like if they're like messing around in like I don't even have like a great example, but like
Mhm.
if they're afraid that something's going to happen to them and then they like fix their behavior, like maybe that was necessary fear to help them like fix their behavior and like act better or like be a better person or whatever. But also like talking about like trusting and like talking about God, like I feel like you can't truly have fear and trust at the same time. Like if you have fear, that means you're not trusting. And if you
Mhm.
trust, then you won't have fear. And I don't know if that's true for every situation, but I feel like that's what I just thought of. Because I can
Mhm.
think of like situations where I'm afraid or I have been afraid and like worrying about something. And then like I do a little like self check and I'm like, okay, but am I really trusting that like God has this in control? And then at times, like that can be really hard to trust that like everything is going to be okay and that God has everything in control, especially when there are so many potential scenarios that could go wrong. But again, that's like
Mhm.
looking into the future and like the unknown. Um,
Mhm.
but I feel like if I am truly trusting that God has everything under control, then I don't fear and worry.
Yeah, I agree. It also makes me maybe this is going into a rabbit hole that we don't necessarily need to go into because I feel like it could be a hot topic. But like have you heard like the phrase like God fearing or like fear of God?
Yeah, it's one of the is it it's not a fruit of the Holy Spirit, but it's one of the like seven somethings.
Are you talking about the sheet?
No, I'm
I
not.
don't know.
It's like man, I'm going to think of this later and I'm going to be so annoyed. But like fear of the Lord is like one of the things that you
Hmm.
should have.
And so then it's like, okay, so then shouldn't you have fear? But then it makes me like maybe our definition of fear is different than what that is.
Yeah, cuz I was going to bring that up too, like the fear of the Lord that I feel like that's a good thing, but when they say fear, I like in that case, like you're kind of saying, I don't think they mean it in the same way as when we think of like fear of spiders or fear of like
Mhm.
getting robbed or like something like that. Like I feel like fear of the Lord is being aware that God is so powerful that he can do what he wants
Mhm.
with our lives, and like being aware that he's in control, and like even though he loves us so much and like wants to be our friend and like gives us the best in life, like if he wanted to, he could like end our lives. And so I feel like
Mhm.
in that way, like we have to be afraid of that.
Yeah. Oh, I think it's so interesting because like when I think after my confirmation, like months following it, I was like really struggling with my faith. I don't even know why. Like I genuinely don't have a reason. I think I was just like in a valley, and like I remember not wanting to go to mass, and my mom was like talking to me about it. And I was like, "Man, I just am I'm just fearful that if I don't go to mass, like bad things are going to happen, but I also don't want to go to mass." And she's like, "Well, maybe you should have that fear a little bit." And I was like, "Oh, maybe there is something deeper there that I wasn't really recognizing until like I'm reflecting back on it now, and it's like, yeah, maybe I should have some sort of, I don't know, fear, I guess. But it just sounds weird like to say.
Yeah, I can think of like when I was younger, um, it was like just very drilled in. I'm sure most children now that like don't talk to strangers. Like if a strange car comes up to you on the road, like don't like talk to it, like get like go away. And I feel like I like followed those rules because I was really afraid of like the fear that was instilled in me like with those situations.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like if like a child wouldn't have fear, then that could put them in more danger if they
Mm-hmm.
don't see like the danger that that situation has.
Yeah.
But also then that like gets to be sticky because then I just like got really scared to a point that was like unnecessarily scared about stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like there's a balance of like again like a healthy dose of fear.
Yeah, I feel like maybe you could say like knowledge is important in that scenario. Like rather than making them fearful of it, like maybe a little bit, but like just having the knowledge, like teaching them know like things about safety and strangers and that, which like ends up being sometimes fearful because like same, but
Yeah, I feel like even for me in my life right now, like when I have fears about things or I worry about things, usually more knowledge is helpful to me.
mm-hmm.
Like when I'm worrying about a situation or I'm like whatever, in whatever scenario, like
Mm-hmm.
usually the more information I have, the better.
Yeah.
Like even an example I guess for me is like I'm afraid of driving in bad weather. Like whether it's like severe storms in the summer or like snow in the winter. And so like usually knowledge of like checking the radar helps me,
Mm-hmm.
of like so then I have knowledge so then I can prepare.
Yeah.
And so then usually like when I feel like I'm prepared and I like have a plan, then like that helps my fear diminish in those situations.
Mm-hmm.
But like that's how I combat my fear.
Yeah. I agree. Like knowing, being prepared helps a lot with fear. Now that we've talked about like what we see fear as like and fear as an emotion, I feel like we should talk about like specific fears.
Ooh.
Like I have a list.
I have your fears.
Well, not all of them, but like things that I think are interesting that I would like to talk about.
Okay.
Should I talk about
You
them?
want to share? Sure.
The first one is fear of abandonment.
Ooh.
And it
Say
was
more. I want to hear more about that.
tell me more about that. um it was kind of inspired by, I don't remember what podcast I talked about it in. What was the podcast that I talked about this in? Do you remember?
um Rejection.
Rejection.
Because it
Oh
was
yeah,
one of the
the
seven deadly wounds. Yeah.
okay, so
I
yeah.
was like, it's one of these on this list.
So we're going back to the seven deadly wounds. If you didn't listen to the podcast on rejection, first of all, you should because it's really good. And second of all, basically, when we're talking about the seven deadly wounds, we're talking about um, these wounds that were defined in the Restore the Glory podcast by Dr. Bob something. I don't know how to say his last name. How do you say that?
Shoots.
Schutz.
That's a guess.
Anyways, sorry, Bob, if you're listening.
I don't think
Anyways,
Bob is listening.
the second deadly wound is abandonment. So last time we talked about rejection, this time it's abandonment. And I definitely have felt this a lot. Um, should I read it or should I just talk about it?
Do you want to talk about it first and then
Yeah,
read it?
I'll talk about it first. So the reason that I kind of have this fear, I think, is I'm just reflecting a lot on the times where, like, I don't really have like a really traumatic experience, which I'm really glad, but like of parents leaving or like a really big experience like when I was a kid where I felt abandoned by people necessarily. Like people haven't left a lot, but I think I just have a fear that I don't know, like ever since we graduated college, like people have been leaving. And like we've talked about this multiple times, but to reiterate, we're fearful, or I am, I know maybe you are too, of like people going off and leaving and doing their own thing. And like after the 4 years are done, like people graduate and then leave. And like I feel like a lot of the times I've been fearful of that because change is happening. And I'm just fearful that all these relationships that I built and friendships that I built will end up going away at some point. Like things aren't forever.
Mm-hmm.
And like I'm the type of person, like I'm a very loyal person. I like deeply invest in friendships and like I definitely value quality over quantity. And so like I wouldn't say I have like 10 million friends where I feel like I just have friends in absolutely every place ever. And so like the circle that I keep tends to be like smaller, which like it's definitely expanded, but it takes me a second to like open up to people. And so once I do, like I just have so much fear that as soon as I open up, like people are going to leave. So that could be another thing too, like whether they're physically leaving or they're leaving because I'm opening up. And then they're like, actually, never mind. I don't want to like be
Mm-hmm.
around you anymore.
Mm-hmm. It's giving rejection.
It is
Yeah.
in some ways too. It's rejection and also abandonment. It's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like intertwined in a way. Like I see them as both very similar emotions and fears,
Yeah.
even though they're not, because abandonment more just seems like rejection seems like it's very direct and it's like no, but abandonment just seems like I don't care enough to want to be by you anymore. So like it is a form of rejection, but it seems as more of just like maybe indifference. I don't know.
Yeah. Do you want to read the
Yeah.
affirmation on our little 7 deadly wounds sheet about
Yes.
abandonment?
Yes. So it says, so this is like a, you could say it's like a prayer affirmation that you read when you like brainstorm a scenario where you're feeling abandoned and kind of acknowledging that feeling. So I guess I'll just read it and then you'll get the gist. In the name of Jesus Christ, I renounce the lie that I am alone, that no one understands me or cares for me. I renounce the lie that I am unprotected and that God has abandoned me. In Jesus' name, I announce the truth that Jesus himself promised me, I will never leave you nor forsake you. I will always be with you, or I will be with you always until the end of time. I announce the truth that I am connected and understood and deeply cared for. I announce the truth in Holy Communion. I am united with Christ and the communion of saints. They are always with me, so I am never alone.
That's a sleigh. I love this sheet.
I really do. Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
um,
I feel like one thing on my list, like when I'm thinking of like different fears, that it might be on your list too, but fear of failure. Is that on your list?
it's not, but that is real.
Okay, yeah. I feel like I don't know, it's not something I reflected on lately, I guess, but like throughout college, like that was a really, really big fear of mine. Just because I had so much like my self-identity and my self-worth was wrapped around academics. And so like anytime I wouldn't get like a perfect score, I felt like I was a failure. Which is like so far from the truth. Like I was doing fine, but I was always afraid that like all of a sudden I was just gonna like be doing horribly in life and then like fail and then like not know how to come back from that. But I feel like some of the like most Some of the best situations in my life that I've learned the most from have come from experiences of failure. Like,
Mm.
for example, like I can remember back in 8th grade in science class when I was learning about the phases of the moon. And this is funny now because I talk about it more than I probably should. But like I remember I got the phases of the moon entirely mixed up. Like I like switched all of them around. And so I got like a 2 out of 10 on this quiz, which is like totally an F. And like that freaked me out at the time. But like now, since I like failed at that and I got all of them wrong, I learned them to the point where like now I can tell you like what phase of the moon it's in just by looking at it, which I think is so cool. And like I probably wouldn't have cared if I would have just like done well and gotten a good grade because I can't remember literally anything else from that class or like any other science class like before that in my years of knowledge. So I feel like that's just interesting that I learned the most from that situation because I failed from it. And like, yeah, it like my grade didn't like suffer that much. Like it was like a small failure in that example. But like I feel like that's really symbolic for me for the rest of my life and I really remember that scenario to remind myself that it's okay to fail. Because I feel like a lot of the times I'm afraid of failing because I feel like my self-worth is tied to like my success in like whatever way that is, whether it's academics or um like I write fiction and like my goal is to get published someday. But like man, the literary world is full of no's. Like you can send stuff off and like everybody's like no, no, no. Like it's really tough to get a yes just because it's such a competitive market. And so I feel like in that case like it feels like a failure every time I like get a no, even though like I'm trying like so hard and like working really hard at that. And so I feel like that's really like also can take a ding on my self-worth, but I feel like remembering that failure does not define your self-worth has like it's a nice thing to say. Sometimes it's hard to believe, but
Yeah, I feel like right now I'm like, I'm not scared of failing. Like, what are you even talking about? But then I'm like, well, that's because I don't fail that often. Not because I'm like so great at everything, but just because sometimes, like, oh, this was on my list. Like, one of the questions that I was reflecting on is, do you avoid things because you're fearful of them?
oh.
And I'm like, just having an epiphany right now, a second epiphany on the podcast. And I'm like, oh, I sometimes don't even put myself out there because I'm fearful of like something happening, or I don't take the risk because I'm fearful that I'm going to fail. And so like I don't fail because I don't even give myself an opportunity to fail.
Mhm.
Which like I totally agree with that like science, like I relate to that science story because like I don't I don't even remember all my successes. I feel like I'm more likely to remember my failures than I am to
Mhm.
remember my successes because those are like the most impactful experiences. Like if we're thinking about the rollerblading experience of 2024, like I really failed there. Like I just fell, you know? That was embarrassing. But now I'm like I remember that experience. And now I feel like I don't know, I'm kind of better for it even though it's not that deep. And then I also look back and I'm like, wow, things were really not that deep. Like I oh my gosh, I was so embarrassed for so long. So you guys are really you're getting the tea. But I failed my driver's test 3 times. And like I'm not a bad driver. Megan can attest. I'm not a bad driver.
Oh, she's good.
So like it was kind of a long story, but a lot of like test anxiety and stuff like that that really got into my brain. And also I just failed because I got nervous and then messed things up that I probably shouldn't have messed up. But like for the longest time I didn't want to take another test because I was so fearful I was going to fail again. Like I was so embarrassed. And like that definitely was a scenario of fear holding me back from like my success. And now I look back and I'm like, wow, that was I should have just gotten over it. But like at the time it seemed like such a big deal to like fail and not wanting to fail again. So it's just interesting how like you mature and realize, oh, it's not that deep. It's not
Mhm.
that big of a deal. Like just be better, you know?
Just don't fail. No, that's not the point. The
No,
point is
that's
it's
not
okay
the
to
point.
fail.
Yes.
Yes. And come back from it.
Yes.
Okay. Can we talk about exposure therapy a little bit? Do you want me to define exposure therapy?
Yeah, go
Okay.
ahead.
So essentially, I feel like going back to fear, I feel like this is helpful for me. If I'm afraid of like a certain situation or scenario or experience, like usually what helps me get rid of fear is to like do the thing I'm afraid of. So like for instance, like I said, I'm afraid of driving in bad weather. Like driving in bad weather helps me become less fearful of driving in bad weather because then like I'll experience it and I'll live. Like even just a couple weeks ago, I drove through some like it was dark, it was raining really hard, and I was on like foreign roads and I thought I was going to die. Not actually, but like I was so scared. But then like I survived and like an hour later I was like back home and I was like, "Oh, actually all is well. I'm fine. I'm a big girl. I can do this." And so I feel like the next time I go out and there's going to be scary driving, I can remember I was like, I've done this before and like I was okay and I'm very capable of doing scary things. And so I feel like that's really helpful for me. And I'm an advocate for exposure therapy, but I'm curious what you think about exposure therapy for yourself.
I think there are pros and cons to it. I think that yes, you should put like do things you're afraid of even though you're afraid and like do it anyways. But I also think there's in a certain extent like I don't know, sometimes people aren't ready and like pressuring people to expose themselves to the things they're afraid of like isn't always necessarily the right way to go about it. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a therapist, so I don't know like the psychology of exposure therapy, but I will say like if you're forcing someone to do something they're not ready for, like that probably would be worse than like talking them through it and then making them do it. But I will say, like, when I do the things that I'm afraid of, like, I had fear of public speaking for a while, and then I took a public speaking class, and I was like, okay, so actually, I can totally do this. And then I remember and I look back and I'm like, wow, I'm so proud of myself that I did this, even though I was fearful of it. And like, those are some of the most rewarding things ever. But like, I do think it's a personal choice of like, you need to be the person to make that decision and say, yeah, I'm going to do this and like do this exposure therapy thing because I know that I'm afraid, but I know that the only reason that I'm not doing it is because I'm afraid, and that like is the reason to do it anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Is that about the dirty? That's what I started.
Yeah.
I thought I sounded like that. Anyways.
Yeah, I feel like some of my biggest experiences of growth have come from doing things afraid.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we should see how many times in a row I can talk about being in a musical. But like, I was so afraid to go audition for a musical because I was like, I didn't know exactly what the situation was going to be. It'd been a while, and I was really afraid. But I was like, you know what, Megan? I know you're afraid, but I needed to force myself to do it because I knew that the only reason I didn't want to is because I was afraid. And so, like in that situation, like forcing myself to, I knew that was what was best for me. And like I'm so glad I did. And like there's been like situations like that in my life where I'm like I really don't want to because I'm afraid and I need to like put myself like out of my comfort zone, but like that's when I experience the most growth.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like fear and doing things even though you're fearful equals a lot of growth.
Mhm.
Like if you let it be that way. Like I do think you need to have the mindset of like allowing yourself to I don't know, grow from it because otherwise you're not going to be very successful,
Mhm.
likely.
Yeah.
Another one of my fears, if we're just going to keep talking about fears,
Yeah.
this is going to be kind of dark. So,
Oh.
I have a deep fear of people dying.
Like people you know?
Yes. So, I haven't experienced a lot of grief in my life, and I feel very blessed in that way. Like, both sets of my grandparents are still alive. Like, there haven't been a lot of deaths in my family or like friends that I've known of. Like, I've known of people, but not like people that I'm really close to. And I feel like maybe that stems from like abandonment in some form of like feeling like they're gonna leave you. But I don't know, like sometimes I'm like, will I ever be able to handle it? Like, will I ever be able to recover if like when someone I love dies? Because it's gonna happen.
Mhm.
And I'm like so fearful of it. And I don't know. I feel like in some ways it's powerlessness of like not having any power over any of this. Like life is literally short. Like it's just how it is, and I can't control any of it. It goes back to control. It's
Mhm.
like I can't control how long people are gonna live. I can't control how long I'm gonna live. Like who knows?
Mhm.
And like death seems so like final and like I don't know. Like I feel things very deeply and I am just afraid that when that happens that I'm not going to be able to recover.
Do you think it stems from a fear of being alone? Is that like at the root of your fear of people dying?
I think I do really have a fear of being alone too. Like yeah. Yeah, I could see that
Mm-hmm.
because I don't fear being alone in the same way that I used to. Like so I would be afraid to like go places on my own and like even travel alone, which I haven't done yet, but like the idea of doing that now doesn't seem so fearful because or doesn't seem so
Scary.
scary because like I'm so comfortable with myself and I feel a lot more confident than I ever have in like my abilities to survive and thrive and all of that. Like so like in that way I'm not as afraid. Like sometimes I just go to places by myself because I'm like I want to do this and I don't really have anyone to go with, so I'm just going to do it anyways. And that is not what I would have done before. Like I would have been so afraid of doing that. But I think like fear of being alone in the sense of like not having deep connections and relationships with people and like not having people that care about me, which like I honestly don't ever see happening. Like I really hope that never happens, but I think in that sense like I am fearful of that. I'm like what if I like I'm like the only one left of like my family? Or like what if all of my college roommates die before I die? I'm like, "Oh my gosh, like that's scary." I don't want to think about that,
Yeah, that is sad.
but I don't know. It probably won't happen. And I try not to think about it too much, but I feel like it's a fear that I've had, especially during COVID. Like I was so afraid of like giving like my grandparents or like people at risk COVID and then them dying and like it was going to be my fault.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like so afraid of that. My mom was like, "Well, you just got to get over it." Just kidding, she didn't say that.
But
But
like
like
also
in some
it's hard
ways,
to like live with the reality that like if you're afraid of something that you know is inevitable, I feel like that's
yeah.
also that's tough. I remember so my dog passed away earlier this year and she was going to be 14. She was like a week away from turning 14, but I like got her for my 8th birthday. So like she was my dog and she was like my best friend in the world. She's in all the pictures of every milestone in my life ever, like prom, graduation, all my birthday parties. Like she was just my best friend. Her name was Zoe. And I, for years, like it started kind of when I went to college because I left her at home and she had a lot of separation anxiety from me. And so like it was just really tough to like see her at home. And then I started worrying about her dying. And I had so many like bad dreams and fears of like when she was literally still alive of like her dying. And it's just, I don't know, it's strange because like then it happened. And of course it was sad and that was like very difficult. But also like when it came along, like I felt like, I don't know, I was kind of prepared mentally for it.
Hmm.
So then I felt like in that situation, like it was so sad, but also like she was a dog and I knew that she wasn't going to live forever. And so like I knew it was inevitable that it was going to happen. And I feel like a lot of the times the fear of her dying in those situations were almost worse than her actually dying. Cuz by the time she died like she was in pain, like it was like almost peaceful I like to give her like a rest because she was just like so old and so tired. And so
Hmm.
then I feel like in that situation it was better than her
Yeah.
like being alive. But I remember being so fearful about her dying.
Hmm. Yeah. And then I'm like, well, what if I'm not prepared? Because I won't be ever prepared.
I know.
But it's giving what if, and we can't be asking.
That's why you gotta
Fear is
pray
what
about it.
if, and faith is even if.
Yep.
Actually, even when at this point, like everyone's gonna die, and so like I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like
It's
that's
just
why it's
fear.
so important to like treat every day like it could be your last day. Because like genuinely, like we're not promised tomorrow. Like
Hmm.
we could die anytime. Like we're not promised anything. And so I feel like acting every day like it's your last day and like spending time with your loved ones and like telling people you love them and showing people you love them, I feel like is so important because of that. And I feel like sometimes that's kind of a morbid way to think, like, what would I do if today was my last day on earth? But also, I feel like that helps me find value in every day until maybe put myself out there in ways that I wouldn't otherwise, and
Hmm.
like tell people how I feel.
That's why I like sad music and sad movies. Because no, but like for real, because it reminds me of like the value of life. And like I don't know. I feel like sadness or like loss or grief, like those emotions are like terrible to experience, but in the same at the same time, like there's so much beauty in it because it just reminds you that life is finite and like things are going to end and they're going to like break and nothing is forever except for Jesus.
Amen.
And I feel I feel like that helps me value the days that I am living and alive. Like you don't live every one. You don't live once. You live every day. You only die once, and so then it's like Yodo instead of YOLO. But
You only die once.
well, it's true. Like you live every day. Every day is a choice to live, even with the fear of things going wrong, or even if the fear of rejection or abandonment or death. Like you make a choice every day to live, and so I feel like that's what keeps me sane and keeps me going and like not letting fear like determine my life because like a lot of the times when I do things that I'm fearful of anyways, like I'm like so glad I did it. Like I don't have regrets about doing it. I have regrets about not doing things because I was fearful.
Amen. Have we talked about Yodo before? I'm pretty sure I've told you that because my high school friends coined the phrase "you only die once."
I thought I saw that online.
Really?
Maybe people got
Maybe.
yeah.
We talked about that. I don't know if I've ever shared that with you. I feel like maybe, but it also could be online.
Yodo.
Yeah. I'm just thinking of this now, but I realized that so my favorite Bible verse is Psalm 23. Specifically, I think it's verse 4, but it's even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are by my side. Your rod and your staff comfort me. And I feel like that if I would get a tattoo of a Bible verse, like it would be that specifically. Because I feel like that is just a reminder that there is literally nothing on this earth that is scarier than like God is able to like I don't know. There's nothing scarier on earth. How do I say this? Like I know you know what I mean, but like nothing on this earth is as scary as like the devil. Like there is no worldly thing that should be scarier than God's protection.
Mm-hmm.
Like God will protect us from all earthly things. We really like literally I could think of like some of the things I'm the most scared of on this earth and it is nothing when I think about like going to heaven and being with Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And so then that gives me comfort. And like then I'm like, man, I should really just be scared of the devil and like the temptations that would take me away from heaven. And I'm like, that's the real fear here.
For real.
Yikes.
The devil creeps me out.
That's scary.
That reminded me, I started to watch the movie Mary. Have you heard of it?
Mm-mm.
It's came out like December 6th or something, and it's about Mary's life. And like, I started to watch it.
Mary who? Like the Virgin Mary?
Like the Mother of
Okay.
God.
That's what I thought you meant, but I was like, yay.
Who else?
I don't know. You can't just say Mary. So
Wow, we were talking about Jesus.
Okay, sorry.
And God.
Okay.
Anyways, and like it reminds me of the story of like the angel Gabriel coming to Mary and being like, "Be not afraid," and that's like the first thing that angels say like when they're coming to like talk to somebody on earth. And I'm like, that is so interesting. Like, be not afraid is like the first thing that is said. And it's like, that is the first emotion I probably would feel. I'd be like, I'm so scared right now. Like, I'm so scared. But it just shows like how much fear like dictates people. Which like same. I'm not gonna be sitting here like that's not me, because it is. But I don't know, I just thought that was interesting. And like also in this movie that I didn't actually finish, I just saw like the first part, there was like a devil scene in it, and I was like, oh, I really do not like this. And it's like, that's literally the whole point. That's literally the point.
What's the movie that we were talking about with our friends that's like a picture or like a like the
Passion
devil,
of the Christ? No.
No, the devil like possesses some dude and then he's like the whole movie is like him talking. Do you know what I'm talking about?
That sounds terrifying.
Okay. Was I talking to you about it?
I don't remember.
Certain people listening to this podcast will know, and you'll have to tell me later. But
I don't remember being a part of that conversation, but maybe I was and I just wasn't listening. But
Maybe. I feel like we've talked about it a couple times. Anyway, basically, from what I remember, it's like the devil is in this man's body, and this man is like talking about how he's like corrupting the world. And I don't have a great description of it because I was like, that sounds scary. I don't want to watch it. But like,
because she's fearful, but maybe should do it anyways.
for real. Yeah, maybe. I feel like lately, so I always say, like, I believe in ghosts and spirits, and I'm so afraid of them. Like
Mm-hmm.
I have said before, like the Holy Spirit himself could come down to me and I would be so scared because I'm just like really scared of spirits. But
Mm-hmm.
honestly, the other day, like I was just, we have this picture of Jesus on our wall that I'm staring at actually right now. And I don't know, I was just like sitting here like looking at it, and then like a light started flickering in our house, and I was like, you know what? There could be a spirit here. But I was just like really calm in a way that I've never been before. And I was like, you know what? I think I'm just being fearful for nothing because like I truly that trust that Jesus loves me, and that literally, I don't know, like he's in control of all
Mm-hmm.
spirits.
Isn't that so crazy how like when you're close with Jesus, like things are just peaceful?
Yeah. And it's crazy because going back to the like you can't trust and be afraid at the same time. And
Mm-hmm.
so like in that moment, I was very trusting that I was like, I know that you love me and you're in control and like I'm safe. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, then it's literally I was like, come on down, Holy Spirit. Like
Yeah, for real. Like, think about, okay, now I'm just like thinking of so many random things. Like, we're really just going all over the place. So sorry. Um, Now I'm thinking about like how fearful Jesus could have been, like when he was being condemned and like going to the cross and like all of these things, like horrible experiences that he
mhm.
had, and like he just had so much faith and like that. Oh, to like have that sense of peace while going through all of that pain and torture and like all of that. Like most of us are not going to experience that like physical pain that he did,
Mhm.
which like thank goodness, like that is horrible. But
Mhm.
like we'll experience things in different ways because the world is the world and you're going to experience a lot of pain from people because that is how the world is. And like still having peace is like oh, just something that I want to have. And so like you ever thought about with the sign of peace where you're like peace be with you? And I never like the other day I was like actually thinking about it. Like we're literally telling people to like have peace. And I was like, oh yeah, like have peace. Like peace be with you. Like
Mhm. Peace be with you
you and even you.
and with your spirit. Mhm.
For real. Con tu espiritus. I'm so sorry. That was probably incorrect. Actually, I think that was right, but that was just.
That was uncalled for. But thank you.
You're welcome. I don't know if that's Latin or Spanish, or if it's kind of a mix of both, or it's just incorrect. So I'm gonna apologize. Anyways,
She's fearful that she got it wrong.
I know I really am.
Okay. I feel like going from all of that fear to talking about FOMO sounds a little anticlimactic, but I also wanted to talk about FOMO a little bit, the fear of missing out, which is an acronym. Um, I don't know. What do you think? Do you have FOMO in your life? Do you want to talk about FOMO? Do you want me
Oh,
to
for
start?
sure, for sure, I have FOMO.
Like, I feel like sometimes that is my greatest fear socially.
Mm.
Like, that I have to do everything all the time and can never say no to things because that one time that I am not there when people are hanging out will be the time that some epiphany or something happens that like I'm going to miss, and it's going to be like detrimental to my social life.
Yeah, I feel like I have FOMO when it comes to like my close friends, but I have less FOMO when it comes to like socially like what is popular, what is cool. Like
Mm.
I'm not I don't know, I'm thinking specifically back to college and like going out to the bars and like all of that sort of stuff. Like I only started having FOMO when it was like people I knew that were going, like you
Mhm.
and like our roomies. And I was like having FOMO because I knew you guys were going out. But when I didn't know, like when I wasn't really close with people, I wasn't like, oh my gosh, that looks like the greatest time in my whole life. I really want to go. Like it was more because of the people that were going to experience it that I knew rather than just like generally society like being like you should do this.
Yep.
So yes, I feel like I experienced FOMO. Also maybe just because like I want to be included in things and like that goes back to like a whole long history of feeling unincluded or feeling like on the sidelines and an outsider.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't know. So like yes, I do, but also not as much anymore because I have good friends that include me in things. So
Mm-hmm.
then I feel less FOMO.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like FOMO is so common and like still happens in my life, but I feel like as far back as I can like think and remember, I feel like I have not let FOMO influence my actions, but like it definitely like hurts me mentally. Cuz
Mhm.
like when I'm thinking of like the bar, like we didn't go to the bar before we were 21. Like I still had FOMO. Like I was like, "Dang, like those people are cool at the bar. Wish I could be there." But like I like didn't want to get in trouble. And so like then I didn't go.
Mhm.
But then I don't know, like I still like felt the FOMO even though I didn't like give in to the like fear of the missing out. Or even like I know like now in our lives like I can tell when I just need like a night to read my book and go to bed at 9 p.m. But
Mhm.
like I know one night like this past week like you went out with our friends and I stayed here and like I was very much welcome to also come but I knew that I couldn't do that. I needed to sleep. And so, like, even though I was like, dang, I wish I could hang out with people and like I love spending time with people, like, I knew it was in my best interest to not that time. And so I feel
Yeah.
like I'm good at like sensing what my needs are and like acting on my needs. I'm very good at my self care. Like,
Oh yeah.
I very much put my self care first. But I still feel the FOMO, I guess.
Yeah. I think that's important though of like acknowledging that you're feeling a certain type of way like FOMO and still putting yourself first and still like because if we're always acting on emotions and like not being logical about situations, like if we use your example, like it was important that you got sleep, like you needed to deny the feelings of FOMO, not deny them, but like not act on them because you knew that was going to be better for you in the long run.
Yeah.
So I think that's important too.
Yeah, I feel like something that's helpful for me in situations like that, and this goes for all fear, not just fear of missing out, but like for me, pinpointing exactly, like being able to voice exactly what it is I'm afraid about, like really helps because then like the logical side of my brain kicks in and then it really helps me like calm down my fear. So like in that situation, like what am I afraid of? I'm afraid that like people are going to spend time together without me and not want to be friends with me because I wasn't there that one time for a couple hours. And so then I can be like, well, Megan, logically, that doesn't make sense because these people are your friends and they love you and they want to spend time with you and they will respect you for like knowing your boundaries. And so then that's helpful. Or even like in bad weather, like I'm afraid that I'm going to like go into the ditch and like freeze to death in my car. And so then I like take precautions and like put blankets in my car and like, I don't know, just like things that like I'm able to like figure out exactly what it is I'm afraid of and fix that problem and then it helps like the fear in general go away.
Yeah. I definitely, yeah, going back to like being prepared, I think that helps a lot with fear. That's what I did too. I have so much stuff in my car. I have a shovel, I have
Mm-hmm.
blankets, I have boots, I have hat and gloves.
Boots with the fur.
The whole club was looking at me. Just kidding. I've said this so many times, but wouldn't you be so scared if everybody was looking at you? Like, I'd have fear.
For real, but then I also was like, but if you were wearing apple bottom jeans, boots with the fur, baggy sweatpants, and Reeboks with a strap, like wouldn't everybody be looking at you? You'd be
Yeah,
looking like
you'd
a
be
freak.
looking crazy. Like, what kind of fashion is that? It's giving 2010. Like, that's horrible.
Such a janky outfit. What
Yeah.
do you mean?
Like, why do you have like two pairs of shoes on? Because like Reeboks with the straps
and
boots with the fur.
That's embarrassing.
And
I'd be
also,
looking at
okay,
you too.
can we just talk about, is it boots with the fur as in the boots have fur, or boots, period, fur, like a fur jacket? Because that's what I heard. Like,
Oh.
maybe he means fur, like she's wearing fur, but not on her boots.
Oh.
But I don't
Maybe.
actually know.
I don't know
Anyways, I don't
either.
know why I'm getting so...
I've always thought it was furry boots.
Me too.
Not that it really matters.
It
We should
doesn't,
ask.
Who even sings this?
I'm not.
The fur, the fur.
We should know that. Let's pretend that
we're
we know.
embarrassing. I'm so sorry.
I definitely know. I'm just not gonna look it up right now.
No, it's not that deep.
It's okay. We're at 49 minutes. Any other last things that you want to say before we wrap this up?
That's really a lot of pressure.
Sorry.
I was trying to think of like an inspirational quote, but I don't have any. I don't have any inspirational quotes.
I feel like I can ask you one final question that will wrap it up.
Mm-hmm.
How do we keep fear from overpowering our lives?
Prayer. That's like
Amen.
my immediate reaction. Like whenever I'm fearful, like praying about it eases so much of my fear.
Mm-hmm.
And like faith. Like that's like faith is like the emotion or like the thing you need to have, and the way to get there is through prayer. Yeah. But like that's not always easy.
Yeah. I'd say I would even broaden that and just say like communication. Like if you need to communicate with God, like the prayer is so important. But also sometimes like to help your fear, like you need to communicate with others too. Like keeping things to yourself. I don't do that, but like I know people that do. And like I just know that's like it's really hard to like help yourself and like get over things if you can't like share it with other people. Because even sometimes just like being able to voice a fear like gives it less power.
I agree. Like communicating your needs to other people like helps that too, because like we're not supposed to go through life alone. Like that's not the goal.
Yeah,
we're supposed to bring other people along, so like bringing other people into our fears is a good thing to do.
Yeah.
I just thought of a brief little story that I kind of want you to tell.
Okay.
That relates to fear and something that happened to be in your room, such as an insect.
Oh no. Okay, going way back to spiders. So spiders, are you also afraid of spiders?
Yes, but not as severely. I've never seen you so fearful in my life.
Oh, okay. So anyway, when we first moved into the place we're living, it was the night that we moved in, and Kelly was in my room as I was unboxing these many, many boxes of books. And I had already made my bed. And so I moved some of the boxes to like bring them out to my car that were empty. And did you see it or did I see it?
You saw it.
I saw this massive spider on my bed. Like it was
huge.
It was probably the size of like $1 coin, if you can imagine that. And it was like fuzzy gray.
It was like juicy. It was like a juicy spider.
Oh, it wasn't daddy long leg. No, it was like a thick one. And I tell you, when I am like scared of like itty bitty spiders, I never kill my own spiders. I always have my like brothers kill them for me. Absolutely not. I'm so scared. But like it was me and Kelly in this apartment, and I was like, okay. So I was like, do you want to kill it? And like I was like, no. So I was gonna kill it, and so I was so scared, and so I got a boot from my like shoe rack. And I just like approach it, afraid it's gonna like jump up at me and like eat my face, apparently. But I like hit the boot on the bed and like squish it. But then I was afraid that like if I brought my boot up, it was gonna like crawl out at me. So then I was like, Kelly, get me another boot. And so she like went to go get me another boot so I could like also squish it. And then I like smeared it into my
She like smeared
it
into
my bedspread to make sure it was dead. And then it kind of left a stain on the bedspread, which is it's no longer there. But like
oh, that is an example of overcoming your fear, though.
For real, because at that point, there was nobody there that was going to get the spider for me. Like, It was me and Kelly. And I was like, this is my spider. This is my responsibility. I just have to suck it up and get this stupid spider.
Yeah. Also, have you seen those videos on Instagram? You probably haven't, because you probably would, like, skip them. But I've seen videos where, like, people kill spiders and then baby spiders will, like, spring out of them. I was so afraid that was gonna happen.
I have not seen those.
Okay, well, that's fine. They're terrible. They're terrible. Anyways, I just felt like that was a fun little story that maybe you could end this podcast with.
That's great.
It was great.
Great way to end it. So if you ever see me and a spider, please kill the spider for me.
Yes.
Because I can do it, but I don't want to.
She's a girl, but she's also just a girl.
For real. Like,
she can do it.
I'm a strong, independent woman, but please kill my spiders. Oh my gosh. Okay. Anyways. On that note, I guess we'll be done.
Ciao.
Thanks for listening. Bye.